Sup? Me again. Now, for this video, we're going to try to conclude our discussion of Emily Dickinson with two poems. I don't know if I'll be able to cover them both, but I'm sure dang old going to try. We're moving from I Never Lost As Much But Twice, as we're talking about that trauma. One thing I like to point out with Emily Dickinson is that a lot of her poems are actually, like, kind of normal. Like, you know, some of them are about passion and love and nature. She's not all dark, not all brutally horrible, but I just like the brutal, horrible ones. Again, you've probably noticed a little bit of a pattern here. But this poem feels a lot like it comes after I Never Lost As Much But Twice. There's absolutely no way to substantiate that. And again, that's me trying to play the new historicist. But as far as a personal connection to this goes, I feel a great deal of connection with the sentiment of this poem because it seems to be describing a nervous breakdown. I've had a nervous breakdown. This is pretty accurate. So, this poem is titled, you know, cheerfully enough, I Felt a Funeral in My Brain. I don't know how many of you guys were emo kids in high school. I can make fun of the emo kids because I was one. But, I mean, I know I've probably done it before, but I'm going to do it again because it entertains me. I had the wispy black hair, and I was all walking around like, my heart is just so full of feeling, and I feel emotions differently from everyone else, and stuff like that, and you people just don't understand me. Well, that's like totally me. So, you know, I feel a kinship with those people. Dickinson was doing stuff like that long before emo was ever a thing. In my opinion, she was doing it better. Because Dickinson doesn't use cliches. She doesn't use phrases that are tired. This almost could work well as a poem that would be published today, as opposed to a lot of the stuff that we've seen before. This poem, in my opinion, and a lot of people would argue me on this, I'm sure, this poem functions extremely well in a more modern context. So let me just read this for you real quick. We'll analyze it. I felt a funeral in my brain, and mourners to and fro kept treading, till it seemed that sense was breaking through. Notice the capitalization of sense there. We're supposed to really stop and think about that sense was breaking through. What does that seem to be saying? Her senses are breaking. The mourners to and fro, walking around, treading. Again, it's hard to really connect with students on this because treading is, the repetition there is really good English poetry because English poetry really does not lend itself to rhyme very well. It's much better with repetition and consonant sounds, and that sounds almost like heavy footsteps. Treading. Let's keep going. And when they all were seated, a service, like a drum, kept beating, till I thought my mind was going numb. In the middle of a nervous breakdown, I know normally people try to read poems and like keep it all together. It's a sacred unit. You have to read it all. I kind of like to analyze it as I go. It's easier. A nervous breakdown, one of the things that ends up happening is really frightening is you really hear your own heartbeat. You become hyper aware, or at least I did. I don't know if this is universal for everybody else, but I became really, really hyper aware of my heartbeat. And it was almost like something that was like kind of terrifying. And it's funny because she doesn't come right out and say it's a heartbeat. She refers to it as a service. It's a funeral in her brain, and the beating is the service that is holding the funeral. Again, part of the magic and the beauty of poetry is finding ways to describe stuff that defies convention. That is a really weird way of doing that. And then I heard them lift a box and creak across my soul. Notice the capitalization. With those same boots of lead again, then space began to toll. There's almost like a cosmic sense here. Like the whole universe is beginning to break and give way. It is, again, the emotion here is so complex and so unsettling. As all the heavens were a bell, and being but an ear and eye and silence, some strange race wrecked, solitary here. Now, again, for me, when I had my issues, you start thinking of everything in very extreme terms. Things are only one thing. They embody one facet of themselves. Really hard to explain. And as all the heavens are a bell, and being but an ear, she is just an ear to hear this, right? All of heaven is ringing like a dreadful bell. Like, this is pretty out there. Like, you would have to be quite to be at this point. And like I said, it's something that rings incredibly true for me. And then a plank in reason broke. And then I dropped down and hit a world at every plunge and finished knowing then. That's a hell of a final stanza. Holy moly, it's a heck of a final stanza. And then a plank in reason broke, and I dropped down and hit a world at every plunge. And finished knowing then. I mean, I could probably make a 30-minute video just analyzing the final stanza there. What on earth happened? Well, she feels the funeral in her brain, she feels the weight, she hears the bells in the sky, all this stuff is spinning out of control in her head, and then the plank in reason broke. It's like everything just kind of snapped, right? And dropping, the sense of falling, dropping down. You can't control yourself. You're falling out of yourself, hitting a world at every plunge. You can't even quite wrap your head around it, which, again, is extremely accurate for what it feels like to kind of sort of be losing your mind. Dang, it's an incredible poem. I mean, like, seriously. And I know you guys probably don't feel the excitement that I feel with these types of things, but dang, it just works, right? It's bewildering. It's frightening in a lot of ways. Now, they're probably going to run a little long here, and I might want to sneak in one more poem. But next one I want to do is, Because I Could Not Stop for Death. I'm actually looking it up right now. Get to see my process here. I don't use books anymore. I just use the webs and the internets. This one's interesting, and this one has a lot of similar kind of motifs and images. Remember what I said earlier, that Dickinson is a very religious thinker, and you can kind of see that even in these poems where she's talking about kind of like losing her mind a little bit. We've got mourners, we've got a funeral, we have a religious service. This is a good one too. It has a really weird opening, but let's go with it. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves in immortality. I love the image here of death as a kindly gentleman. If you've been suffering with mental health for a long time, and there's a lot of like issues that you've been trying to work yourself through, a lot of mental pain, there are times when death feels like a kindly gentleman who's there to take it all away. We slowly drove, he knew no haste, and I had put away my labor and my leisure too, both my work and my play had been put away, for his civility. He's so charming and so relaxed. That's like, I don't need all that play and work anymore. I'm with you, death. Sweet. Let's go to the drive-in theater in Jessup, right? We passed the school where children strove at recess. That's interesting too. Strove at recess? They're like striving, not playing striving, working towards it. In the ring, we passed the fields of gazing grain. We passed the setting sun. We passed the sun. They're starting to move fast here, right? They're starting to pass actual bits of celestial images. Or rather, he passed us. we're moving very quickly, but at the same time we're not moving at all. This is a very familiar motif that she will work with, that death brings contradictions. Things are happening, but they're not happening. The dews drew quivering and chill, for only gossamer my gown, my tippet only tulle. Look up gossamer and tippet and tulle. That's a little bit of an assignment. I might work that in as an essay question at some point. What are those things? What is their significance? I can't do all the work for you people. All right. We paused before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. The roof was scarcely visible, the cornice in the ground. What is this thing? It's a house. It seemed a swelling of the ground. It's a grave. Happy. Since then, and this is probably her endings, man, fantastic. This last stanza. Notice the very strange conception of time here. Since then 'tis centuries, and yet feels shorter than the day. I first surmised the horses' heads were toward eternity. That's a tough rhyme at the end. Feels shorter than the day. I first surmised the horses' heads were toward eternity. It doesn't quite rhyme, which is, again, kind of cool, because remember, she's dead, right? I've always been told that I say that word with a lot of dramatic oomph. Death. So the rhyme kind of falls apart at the very end. It's been centuries, but it feels like only a day to her. And it's been that since she realized they were heading toward the eternity. I love this poem. Again, its images are so cool and so striking. But the thing that I like to point out here is that at this point we're really kind of like in the Victorian era of American literature. People were really, really, really religious, and most people had this conception of God and death as being kind of like, an instantaneous thing, like you're going to heaven, right? Or, most biblical interpretations of the book of Revelation suggest that you would have no experience of death at all. You would sleep, and then you would awaken at the resurrection. Now, Dickinson's doing something really different here, and she's breaking with theological tradition. She's showing us an experience of death, an experience of what it's like to die as we lose ourselves, and as time begins to warp and twist, as we lose a sense of space and perspective. I really wish I could go back in time and buy Emily a beer. Like, seriously. That is just dang clever for her time. She was a pioneer of poetry. Never seen anything like this before. Emily Dickinson comes in like the Rambo of poetry, and she's just like, all these words, boom! Because I could not stop for death, he's gonna stop for you! Okay, not quite, but this was monumental impact. And yikes. I'm afraid I'm going to have to leave the Fly Buzz video for tomorrow. Enjoy these. I'm working very hard.